Okay. Right, Chris, would you like to, can I hand over to you just to take us through the energy equality project as it stands?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Simon, and good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. So for those who don't know me, my name's Chris Coonick. I am Technical Director at WREN, and I've been putting this project together and project manager for the project. So I think you'll agree that we are in extreme uncertain times, so we are trying to be as flexible as we can with regards to how we actually proceed with this project. So we really are so thankful for you guys turning up, filling in our questionnaire if that's the method in which you have reached us, and participating at this point. But I think there's one thing that we can be certain of, and that is that we are still going to be getting energy bills. If anything, these are probably likely to increase in the future. So if we're actually looking at a longer term for all of us as a community, we'll probably see more charges for non-sustainable energy such as fossil fuels, and obviously the UK is currently transitioning to the electrification of transport. So some people have electric vehicles, and also the government is keen for us all to transfer onto electrification of heating going forward. So that might be a ground source heat pump, an air source heat pump, or direct electric heating. So all of these things are potentially going to make our electricity bills go up. And energy is one of the larger contributors to climate change. It's been proven. Energies in buildings account for approximately 40% of the UK's CO2 emissions. So at WREN, and I'm just going to see if I can flick on the how do I move on there? There we go. Oh, sorry. At WREN, we've seen the important role that renewable energy plays in all of our futures, and we want to provide an equal opportunity to everyone in our community to engage with it. So it really doesn't matter if you own your own roof, or indeed if you don't have a roof at all, if you already own your own solar PV system or some other form of renewable generation. As part of the energy equality project, we're looking at the viability of a community share scheme that will allow anyone in Wadebridge and the surrounding areas to invest in solar that we hope to build out on a number of community buildings. Already we've identified buildings such as the Scout and the Guide Hut, the Town Council Groundsman Hut, and the Bowling Club, to name a few. We've got a list of approximately sort of 25 projects that we want to take forward. We're also putting a proposal into Cornwall Council to install community-owned solar on their buildings in the local area, and a landfill site that's not too far away. But one of the main barriers since the feed-in tariff closed at present to community energy is actually making the business case work. So we need to be able to be confident that we can provide a reasonable and sensible return on investment to anyone who wants to buy shares in the community energy scheme. So that's kind of problem number one. Problem number two, as I said, access to renewable energy. And at present, the wholesale electricity market does not value community energy at all. We would be a very small player, and it's really hard for us to get a price that supports our business case. So we're looking at the idea of basically selling energy to people like you, directly to the local consumers. So anyone who uses electricity in the local area. But we just don't want this to be for new community solar. We want to allow anyone who has any form of renewable electrical generation, so whether or not you are a home with PV on your roof, or you're a business with PV, or you have access to a wind turbine, whatever it is, if you have surplus energy that you don't require or you aren't using in your own home, you will be able to sell it directly, same as what we're proposing for the community owned solar. So you would be able to sell it to me, I could sell it to you, and we can sell it to our neighbours. And that is essentially what is known as a peer-to-peer trading platform. So we as WREN are aspiring to become the UK's first community aggregator, holding a live balance sheet of energy transactions across our community. And we hope that in doing this, we will find enough value in the system to offer anyone deemed to be in fuel poverty, so the more vulnerable members of our community, a much reduced or a discounted electricity tariff, so their bills will be lower than what they have at the moment. And just move on. So these are the project aims. So yeah, as I mentioned, we want to address the balance of energy equality in Wadebridge and the surrounding areas. We want to develop an energy trading platform that brings together local consumers and prosumers, so that's people who generate energy, to provide a better energy deal across the community. We want to provide a post-subsidy route, so i.e. now that we don't have feed-in tariff, how can we encourage new local generators? So if somebody wants to invest their own money and not in a community energy project, but say they wanted to invest it in solar on their own house, we want to provide them with this route to market. It may include energy storage, and of course we want to develop more community-owned renewable energy assets. So this is a very basic diagram of how we see this working. It shows the types of roles people might play in this process. So we have the consumers, domestic. Smart consumers means people who might have batteries or electric vehicles and can do two-way trading. We then have the energy asset owners at the top. So they may be privately owned, it may be the community owned PV systems, or it may be somebody who has a battery, and essentially, they are allowed to, they can sell any generation that they don't need, and domestic consumers and business consumers can purchase it. So it's a very straightforward energy transaction. So instead of there being a big power station, it's lots and lots of community owned assets providing that energy, and standard consumers like you and me buying it. So what do we want to achieve? These are the project outcomes. It's only a feasibility study that we're doing at this stage, so at the moment we are only testing the theory, but we want to develop a credible business case for a portfolio of community solar projects so that you are able to invest in them and know exactly where your energy has come from. We want to understand more about the rules and regulations of peer-to-peer trading. It's very, very complicated. It's something that hasn't been done by a community energy group in the UK before. We want to become the UK's first community aggregator to do this and pave the way for other communities to be able to do that. So we're going to be, we're going to be modelling the energy flows, and Philip is going to talk us through that in a moment. To see what essential, what tariff we will be able to offer people. We then want to test that model theoretically with participants and estimate what financial value it may have brought you if you had been on the peer-to-peer platform. And as part of it, we want to then move on to a pilot project, so identifying potential partners that could help us to do this. So in order to do all of this, what we are asking from you is some information about how you use electricity in your home, or if you're a business owner in your business, and we'd also like to see what value the peer-to-peer trading give you. So for that, we will need to know how much your electricity currently costs you, so we can make that comparison. But if you take only one thing away from today's webinar, it's this: anyone can be involved. This project is all about equality. So I appreciate that in these challenging times, we would love to have done this face-to-face at the town hall and talk to the length and breadth of our community. So not everyone has access to social media, the internet, a computer. So we really, really need your help on this. The next time you speak to your mum, your dad, your brother, your sister, your children, your friends, please talk about it. Tell them about it. tell them how they can get involved if they want to be involved. This webinar is being recorded, so we will make it accessible to everyone, but please let everyone know, otherwise it's not going to be very equal. It will be those that are in the know that can get involved, and we want everyone to get involved as much as possible. Back to you, Simon.
Thank you, Chris. That's great. I mean, one thing I'm going to do is just to make sure everyone is here. I just wanted to go through those on the panel. If they can just, basically, I'm going to go through one by one, introduce you. I'm going to finish with Philip Leicester of Advanced Further Energy Limited, part of Loughborough University, I believe. I would like him to speak last, but I'm just going to go through from, I'm just going to read a roll call actually of those on the panel. So starting with Tony Faragher, who is a WREN. Are you there, Tony? Can you just say hello so we know what you look like? Tony, are you there?
You're on mute, Tony.
Yeah, we have to come off mute. That's half why I'm doing this, just to make sure everyone can hear us. So Tony, can you hear me? Okay, I'll just move on. Tony Sampson, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Brilliant. Tony Sampson of Naked Solar. Mark Smith from ZLC.
Hello, yeah, I'm here. Hello.
Hello, Mark. Now we can hear you. That's great. Charlotte Johnson, University College London, UCL.
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Hi, Charlotte. All right. Let's have Felix Wright, Repowering, Brixton, P2P project. Peer-to-peer project, rather.
Yeah, hi Simon, I'm here.
Hi Felix, we're going to be speaking to you in a moment. Kevin Smith of WREN.
Yes, I'm here.
Brilliant. Shaun Hawkey, local businessman.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hello. Richard Jones, also a local businessman and PV prosumer.
Hello.
Hello Richard, thanks for joining us. And Dominic, lastly, Dominic Cormonte, Nanstallon Solar.
I'm here, can you hear me?
Excellent, brilliant. Thank you for joining us. So now I'm just going to go on to Philip Leicester, who's probably going to give us a bit of a lowdown on. So I think that one of the aspects is how this works, the nitty gritty of the financial transaction, that side of things, how that could potentially roll out, because I think people would be very interested in that. So I know he's got a few slides that might just come up. So I'll hand you over, Philip.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Philip. Are you wanting me to do the slides now, Simon?
Yes, go ahead, and then we'll after that we'll go to Felix. So if you can give us, if you can carry on.
So you want me to do the wee presentation now?
Yes, please. Yes, and then we'll be able to discuss it later.
Yeah, yeah. Let me just find the right window.
Sorry, I should give you a bit more of a heads up. Sorry.
Right, I'll share my screen then. So what that has done is sent everybody onto my other screen for some random reason. So let's put that back. So can you? Right, okay. How do I get rid of that? Can you see my main screen with the picture?
You can see the complicated graph.
Right, okay. That isn't what you're meant to be seeing right now. And let me just...
I'm bamboozled already.
Yeah, me too. Right, here we go. Here we go. Right, hi. As introduced, my name's Philip Leicester. I'm from Advanced Further Energy and work also at Loughborough University in the Centre for Energy Systems Technology, and there I do a shed load of modelling renewable energy systems from the small domestic system all the way up to the sort of national grid and the impacts of renewables on the national grid. So just a few slides, which I know we haven't got a lot of time. How long have we had, how long do we have, Simon?
Well, if you can keep it as brief as possible, so 5 minutes would be good.
Right, let's zoom through these slides then. So yeah, I'm sure these will be shareable, so I'll jump through the company information. And basically, this picture that Chris has just shown you, and I'm going to focus a little bit talking about this in the circle here, because the whole business model, if you like, rests on selling exported generation back into the system and purchasing electricity. So it's all about how much electricity we can import or have to import, i.e. how much we have to purchase, and how much surplus energy, if we're generating energy on our roofs or on site, how much of that surplus energy is there. And that's sort of what the crux of the modelling work is that I'm going to be doing. So to do that, I'll just explain a little bit, and you're probably familiar with the idea of self-consumption of your PV systems if you've got a PV system. So the dashed line on this curve with the red underneath is like what our demand is, a typical demand profile during the day. And you can see it rises in the morning. There's a breakfast time, we get up, have showers, put kettles on, and a little blip at lunchtime. We might turn the cooker on a little bit, and then people come home from school and work, and we have an increase in demand, and we have the well-known peak demand in the evening hours, particularly between 4 and 7 o'clock. And our PV system, if we've got one, is generating during the daytime, peaking at noon and coming down again towards the evening. And you can see we have, in this instance here, a surplus of generated electricity, which is exported into the grid. And at other times of the day, we have a deficit of energy and we've got to import from the grid. That's the red areas. And the green is lovely, where we're generating our own electricity and we're self-consuming that on our site. So the surplus energy is exported to the local distribution network, to the grid, and we have this concept of self-consumption. How much of our own energy that we generate do we consume? And that can be increased, of course, by such things as battery storage. But the key thing is it also depends on lots of other factors. Now, that's a very simplified view. In reality, our demand profiles are very spiky. We've got electric kettles coming on, showers and such like. So we have sharp peaks in our day-to-day demand. So it's more complicated to calculate self-consumption. And what we do is we go on a minute time scale so that we can see these sharp ramping up, if you like, of demand. And also the generation can ramp. We have what we call cloud transients, where the sun hops and jumps behind clouds, and that can cause sudden in our generation. And so every day is different, and our demand on every day is different too. So we have to be aware of these sharp spikes, these ramp rates that we have on the system. So the self-consumption then, that all depends on particularly your household's behaviour, how much time you spend at home. If you're working at home, and it's probably very good at time during this epidemic, people are all spending a lot of time at home, so we're probably self-consuming more electricity. That's going to upset my models. And we're going to also self-consume depending on how much energy we use. If we're a large household, we're using more energy, we'll consume more. And also, of course, our percentage, if you like, self-consumption depends how much we're generating. If we've got a 10 kilowatt system, we're not going to be able to consume that as easily as if we only had a 2 kilowatt system, for example. So there's ways of working out how much self-consumption is, and that's what some of the work we'll be doing and getting from you guys is getting an understanding of, in particular, the PV systems that are out there. And we've developed a solar calculator, if you like, which can estimate, and this is some work that Chris was involved in as well, so that we can estimate how much self-consumption we can achieve with various sizes of PV system, batteries if they're involved, and where you are in the country, and what your annual electricity demand is. So I'll just show that a little bit. So here I've clicked zone 4 for Plymouth. I've got an electricity demand of 3,300 kilowatt hours per annum, which is the typical value. I've got a battery involved in this case of 8 kilowatt hours usable capacity, and I've got a system size of 3.6 kilowatt peak. So if I calculate what there we go. So I can calculate what the self-consumption is, how much of our own energy we can consume. And in this case, with solar and with a battery, we can consume 66% of our energy is coming from solar and battery. If we didn't have a battery, it's only 30%, which is a typical value, which means, interestingly, for this project, in this instance, 70% of our energy will be surplus. That means we can export it into the grid. That's quite pertinent for what happens to our exported electricity. So you were probably familiar with the feed-in tariff, where we got an export amount of typically at the end about 5 pence per kilowatt hour. Now we've got the smart export guarantee, where we can get a similar price, and there's these variable tariffs from companies like Octopus. But of course, if we were able to self-consume that, then we're avoiding importing electricity from the grid, and that's of a value of 15 pence. It's far more valuable for us to try and self-consume, but sometimes that is not achievable. Batteries could make a difference, but they're still quite expensive. They come at a cost. There's potential environmental resource issues, lifetime durability issues with that. So another solution is basically what the WREN project is looking at. The Energy Equality Project is seeing, well, if we export that surplus energy to the grid, can we then trade that on a local energy market, on a local platform, and sell that to local consumers or in our own community? And this is what the peer-to-peer trading is all about. And so if we're going to be able to model this effectively, what we need from participants is a sort of rough idea of what your household's behaviour is, how much time do you spend at home. You need to have a look at your energy bills, or you might already know this and work out approximately how much energy you consume in a year. It might be as low as 2,000 kilowatt hours, it might be as high as 5,000 kilowatt hours. It depends if you have electric cookers, a large family, electric heating and such like. So there's all these different loads that will be worth us understanding a little bit more about. And then of course, if you're an energy generator, a prosumer, then what is the system that you have on your roof, and the battery if you've got one, so that we can have a rough estimate of working out and putting into our modelling how much surplus energy that you'll be able to export to the grid. So what we'll be doing then is taking that data, we'll use our simulation models as well, and that will allow us to aggregate across all the different types of generator in Wadebridge how much potentially energy will be surplus to the entire community, if you like, and available then for purchase by other consumers. So once we've done that, WREN will be able to use this analysis and work out then, as Chris outlined, can we actually achieve a reasonable return for community investments? Can we achieve, what's the potential for a cost-saving energy tariff for consumers, or even a greatly reduced tariff for vulnerable groups, people in fuel poverty and the like, and also the affordable delivery of other energy services, which is an aspiration of all community energy projects. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. So we'll be doing some modelling, and I'll just go back to that scary screen you saw at the beginning. And this is the sort of models that we use, and I've compressed that run. And I don't know whether you'll still be able to see this running, but we'll be able to run this and we'll simulate a day's behaviour of generation, battery storage, and import and export, just from basic parameters that we can obtain from people like yourselves. What size of PV system is, what's your behaviour in terms of your occupancy at home during the day, and the size and the orientation and the azimuth of your PV system. And we'll literally do hundreds of simulations like this and aggregate that, and then we can have a first stab at how much surplus electricity there will be for this project, and hopefully then we'll be able to evaluate the viability of this community energy scheme. Thank you very much.
That's brilliant, Philip. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's given us a good basic understanding, I think, of how that might work in the future. But we've got a little bit of practical know-how and knowledge that comes from a similar project, not exactly the same, but a peer-to-peer project that has taken place in Brixton in South London. We have Felix Smith here, Felix Wright, sorry about that, from Repowering. He might like to just unmute himself and just, if you wouldn't mind just discussing that briefly, how that's worked. And because I think it only went online in February, I think. And also maybe Charlotte might come in on that, because she's had a sort of foot in two camps, if you like. I think she's been involved with that slightly, and also has been down to Cornwall and see what it's like on the ground. So if we can get maybe a comparison to what's happening in London and maybe what could potentially happen here in North Cornwall.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, my name's Felix. I work for Repowering London, and I've been involved in what we call the community project. There's an acronym in there somewhere, but it is a peer-to-peer electricity trading project in Brixton in South London. And we work with the electricity supplier EDF Energy on the project, as well as University College London. A bit of background is that in 2012, community-owned solar installation took place on the roof of a block of flats called Elmore House in a social housing estate in Brixton. And so that project's been up and running. It's just about 37 kilowatts since 2012, and it was accredited with a feed-in tariff. And it's the money for the project was raised through a community share offer, and it was one of the first projects like that in kind of inner city area. So it's been very successful, but there is a kind of a bit of a frustration, which is that even though the solar panels are installed on the roof of a block of flats, the residents of that block of flats aren't able to directly use or financially benefit from the solar electricity that is generated. The entire installation is connected to the communal supply for the building, which essentially means the landlord, which is Lambeth Council. So it helps supply electricity to the communal lighting and lifts in the building, but all the flats have their own meters and effectively are on separate supplies. The majority of the electricity generated, the vast majority, 90%, is exported and sold to Good Energy, the electricity supplier, and we receive an export tariff for that, as Philip has already described. So really the motivation for the project was to see a greater benefit to the residents, many of whom are on prepayment or key electricity meters. So they pay kind of over the odds for electricity. They're often on low incomes, so some of them are in fuel poverty. So we kind of wanted to try and address this unfairness, in that if you had the same amount of solar on the roofs of houses, with everyone living in houses, they would all be able to directly benefit from the solar through self-consumption. This is quite difficult to do in the electricity system as it stands, which is why we partnered with EDF Energy. And we've also had a special permission granted by Ofgem, the energy regulator, to conduct this trial and have the arrangements that we do, which allow residents benefit directly. EDF has created their own trading platform for this project, which people who want to participate are able to use. So far, we've recruited 4 households out of 67 in total. So we're just getting started really when the lockdown came in. but we intend to continue recruiting when that is possible. In the meantime, we're running the trial just for those 4 participants, and what they're able to do through the platform, which they access online, is to basically choose how any electricity which sorry, I should go back a step. So the rationale of the system is that all participants, so 4 people, 4 households in this case, get an equal allocation of the solar generation for each day. So if 8 units have been generated in that day, then each participating household gets 2 units each. And if they use it, that is sold to them at a reduced tariff of 10 pence per unit. So that's about 5 pence less than what they'd normally be paying for grid electricity. So they get that saving if they use the solar electricity. If they don't use it, then 2 things can happen. It can either be sold to other residents, or it can be shared with other residents. And they have that option through this interface, through this platform, to set their preferences for that to happen automatically. More sharing means more people get access to lower cost electricity. More selling means that people who use less are allowed to make a bit more money. So part of what we wanted to do in this trial was to see how people react to that, and I guess do it in a slightly different way to some of the other peer-to-peer trials out there, which are all focused really on selling electricity on a peer-to-peer basis. Through the online portal, any participant can see what their savings have been to date, and they receive a monthly credit from EDF based on what those savings are. And they receive that whether they're on a credit meter or on a prepayment meter. And what we've been finding so far is that the savings equate to between 20 and 40% of the electricity bill. That's probably higher than it would normally be because of the small number of participants so far. Although solar generation is obviously increasing as we go into the summer, so it'll probably go up a bit more still. We're looking at an extension of the project to incorporate a battery, which will work kind of in a similar way to what Philip has described, except that we'll have one battery which will be integrated into these trading arrangements on a communal basis. And we're also working with a local network operator to see if we can get some additional revenue from selling electricity or changing the demand from the building at times that reduce the congestion on the network at certain times of day. So I think what our project shows in relation to the feasibility study that WREN are doing is that peer-to-peer trading is possible, technically and practically, but I would say, and there's lots of different ways of doing it, but I would say that it is still something that's very new in the UK electricity system, and it still remains to be seen whether on a permanent basis these trading arrangements can be sort of rolled out in a way which is financially viable for generators, electricity consumers and aggregators. I very much hope that it will be, but that remains an open question, and that's why I think it's a good thing for more trials and research to take place.
Brilliant. Felix, thank you very much. I think we've heard from a different perspective there, or we've had several perspectives so far, and I'm aware of time kicking on, so I wanted to sort of like open it up to our panel. Any questions or to flag up anything that they've heard so far, anything with regards to the energy equality project, and how, with more reference to how it could work in Cornwall, in Wadebridge and Padstow and surrounding areas, and any thoughts. I've had a couple of questions that have come in, but I'll just see if anyone wants to come in at this point to make any comments.
Yeah.
No? Okay.
Yep.
Oh,
This is Kevin. I've found as a consumer also with a panels and a battery, courtesy of the Cornwall Local Energy Market project. I've been able to see the sort of the granularity of the electricity usage. I found in my house, which is an old one without hot water central heating, so I've got electrical heating, that in winter I'm sort of mopping up all the electricity I can produce. In summer, I tend to be sort of not importing anything because, you know, my electricity demand goes down and the battery can cover it. And I'm in an interesting period at the moment where I've got chilly mornings which kick on the electric heating and sort of use up electricity, and then sunny mornings and afternoons where I'm producing a surplus, and sometimes more than the battery can cope. So it's a sort of slightly abnormal position, I suppose, in my usage and production and storage. But it's the point I'm making is the devil is in the detail of when you're actually producing and when the surplus is coming. And without battery storage, that surplus is likely to be at the times that everybody's got surplus. And so you really need to sort of be thinking about the balance of the number of consumers as opposed to producers and consumers.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm very aware that maybe a lot of people who've been doing the surveys are more domestic users and prosumers. I'm just wondering if there's any, you know, should we be discussing more the potential for more solar generation and businesses generating, i.e. on top of industrial buildings? We have got a few in Wadebridge with rooftop solar. I would have assumed, and I don't know for sure, but this is maybe a way that we could go forward. But have we got any businesses? I just wonder if Richard Jones, you've had experience of putting solar on top of industrial buildings. Why aren't more doing it? Why aren't more businesses doing it?
Yeah, I can't answer that question, but I apologise for being a blue blob. It's because I'm actually blue and a blue background, so you can't really see me. No, my camera doesn't work, but yeah, we have quite a lot of rooftop solar, and it works extremely well. It produces quite a lot of income for us. It was good investment. We sell the electricity from each unit that we have rooftop solar on is wired into the unit and then into the grid, so we can monitor how much is produced on each roof, and we can monitor the internal usage, and we charge for the electricity that is produced from solar at 50% of the city electricity rate, which is a nice saving for the tenants, who doesn't cost them anything, and for us it's a little bit of extra income, it's a little bit of bonus on top. So we've found it extremely successful, and I couldn't possibly answer your question as to why more people aren't doing it, other than the initial cost of the investment. I mean, you do need to have enough money to go and stick it on the roof in the first place. So,
sure. And that's possibly where community investment comes in. So I'm wondering if we go back to Chris, you know, there are other sites that we potentially have. I don't know how much can be said, but there's potential sites for community solar arrays. We have, WREN has got one in terms of the Nanstallon solar array. So
Yeah.
That's been, I mean, I wonder if you wouldn't mind talking about that briefly, because that's the
Well,
second.
yeah, I mean, the Nanstallon array is directly connected to the South West Water purification plant in Nanstallon, so that all of that energy is consumed directly on site by that plant. But I think, you know, as Richard was saying, the idea is, you know, ideally the building itself will use the energy that is being generated, but if there is any surplus, then that is what can be sold to the likes of Kevin when his energy consumption is higher than what he generates himself. And indeed it can be sold to anyone who wants to buy it. I think the fact that we will be installing or hoping to install energy on a wide range of community buildings, we're hoping to engage Cornwall Council on their buildings as well, some of which don't have a huge energy consumption. Plus we're looking at the landfill site where there is no energy consumption, so there will be generation that isn't connected to a building that would either necessarily consume all of it or indeed any of it at all. So there will be energy in the system to be able to sell to those who are unable to either cover their own energy by their own solar, or for those who don't have any solar at all.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, and I think there's just a few questions, just the last few moments before we open it up for everyone to ask questions. I don't know how much of a bun fight that will be or how organised it will be, but we want to do that in a few moments because I'm very aware of time. But we've had questions about batteries, and I do remember I was asked a couple of weeks ago by one of the attendees actually here with reference to having batteries. If domestic users take up batteries, so they have a nice sunny day, they're utilising the battery in the evening, how long does it take to fill up the batteries? And if they use everything that they store up and generate and keep in the batteries, where's this surplus going to come from that gets utilised by the energy project? I think I think we should talk about batteries, but they certainly, as it stands out, that same person came back to me and said, you know, actually, I'm storing up my battery, I'm filling it in weather like this at 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. So then he has surplus after that time. But I'm wondering if maybe Mark or Tony can come in and discuss batteries just very briefly, because we are getting a few questions being asked about batteries.
Yeah, happy to come in. Sorry if I'm butting in on you there, Mark. But yeah, as a battery owner as well, I did also see the question from Dan saying, can you tell me about sourcing batteries? Are there local manufacturers? There are some UK manufacturers around. Typical British engineering, it tends to be more expensive. So the better value ones tend to be from abroad, I'm afraid. If you don't want to buy foreign stuff, then you might be a bit out of luck. But yeah, batteries, I'm a battery owner, so we see that this time of year, especially the April, the sunny weather we've been having, despite working from home, me and my wife both working from home, we're still completely off grid throughout April. In fact, March we were as well. So with the right battery setup, then you can have excess even at this time of year. And clearly that excess goes up, as I think Richard pointed out. In the summer, you've got a whole load of surplus that now people can get paid for with the smart export guarantee. So yeah. That's battery. I don't know what other questions that raises, or if Mark's got anything to add.
I don't know. We'll ask. Is Mark there anything to add?
Well, to answer the question about how long is it going to take to charge up? Well, that's obviously dependent on the battery chemistry and the quantity of battery capacity that you have. So you can extend your battery or buy a battery storage system that's going to soak up the total amount of generation that you're going to have as surplus, but it's going to cost you a lot of money. So obviously you want to be investing at the right break point as to a quantity of battery storage, and typically that's somewhere around 6 kilowatt hours for most domestic properties. To be able to go totally off grid, you need a lot of battery storage capacity, and that's an expensive operation. Again, as a battery storage owner and operator, it's to go to that to be able to be totally self-sufficient is expensive in terms of its capital cost.
Thanks, Mark. Yes, I think it was Charlotte mentioned to me it's very difficult to become a complete sort of energy island. You're always going to have to be connected to the grid in one way, shape or form. Okay, we've got about 10-15 minutes left. I want anyone who wants to ask a question, do come in. There are several people who probably be able to put their hands up and answer. So yeah, do any questions regarding, I mean, we've only covered a small part of the whole topic really tonight. Yeah, so if you've got any pent up questions, please ask them now.
We have got some questions on the group chat that's been coming through, so thanks everyone. One from Anthony: what is the proposed business structure? Will this be a community interest company? So as part of the feasibility study, we will be looking at the different options, but WREN's favour would be to go for a community interest company. But we will be looking at a range of options, but it will probably end up being a community interest company. We just need to understand what the rules and regulations with regard to becoming a community aggregator may have on the company structure. Marcus has asked, following up on Kevin's comments, are there any baseload consumers who can give a base level around the clock demand locally? We are aware of a few large energy consumers in and around Wadebridge. Again, we've got another South West Water sewage treatment plant just on the side of the Camel Trail. There's also a number of industrial processes that run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that will be heavy energy users. You know, ideally we'd love to talk to them if we can prove that we can get sufficient generation on scale to meet a portion of their demand. We're focusing mainly on domestic consumers first, but we want businesses to come in as well, and industry as in order to top up any demand should we require it. And Dan has also asked, if surplus electricity would otherwise enter the national grid, is it fair to say that it's quite wasteful and or inefficient? In which case, does a peer-to-peer setup mean less waste? If so, do you want to explore potential support for heavy? Thank you, Dan. We have already well, we have the paperwork to apply for support for TEVI for something that has resulted as part of the questions that we've been asking to people and engaging with people of support that we can give them. And yeah, there's a huge amount of waste in the way that our distribution network is operated, and we do hope that there will be some financial savings from being able to prove to Western Power and possibly National Grid further up that you know we are limiting our use and impact on the wider grid, but we don't know what that is yet. Mark, sorry Simon, I'm just reading these all off.
Go for it, that's good.
When will the survey start? That's a really good question. So this was kind of our launch. We've already got an online Survey Monkey, which has been circulated by Simon on social media and through other things. Simon, do you want to just pick up on that?
Well, yeah, Mark, I think you might have actually done it. I thought I've got you down on the list as having done that survey. But if you want to, yeah, do go to.
I mean the survey about our actual usage. You know, our data from last year, our production and our usage.
So the collection of data for that hopefully will start in May. So we're in the early stages at the moment of kind of gathering momentum and support for the project, and then you know, once we've got a decent list of people who are willing to participate, then we'll be contacting those people approximately May, hopefully, with the questions that we need to fill out Phil's model.
Right, okay. I'm just saying if there's any more. I mean, certainly we can, if anyone wants to come in and ask, physically ask, you don't have to write it in the questions field, but any questions, we've got a wealth of knowledge up there.
Yeah, I'll ask a question. I have typed it out, but I'll ask it anyway. So it seems like there's been some focus on building out new PV, which I can understand, but obviously there's a time delay in doing that. And when this is theoretical, and we know that there are a whole range of domestic PV installations out there. I see Shaun's here from the old house, and in the other commercial buildings. How important is it that new production is as part of this project, and how important when in fact probably a lot of this can be done with existing PV and wind?
Yeah, so absolutely. There is probably a business case there already without having to have new community-owned solar come into it. Basically, the modelling work that Phil will be doing will show us the kind of scale that we need to build it up to in order to make it a viable business case. So as Felix said, it may not be financially viable. We need to be confident of the numbers that have to come onto the platform, and being able to secure those numbers and understand those energy flows, and understanding what happens if they vary. So it may be, if we've got, say for example, sort of 200, ideally maybe 200 domestic consumers, 50 business consumers coming on, what actually happens if we have the situation we're in now, where everyone is at home and they are using their own electricity that they're generating, and that actually changes the profile for Wadebridge and the surrounding areas. What impact will that have on the model? So we need to be really we need to understand the limitations and the variations that might impact on that, and be absolutely confident before we can go forward into a pilot.
Yeah, can I just add something on that? And I think this, and it goes back to the question that Mark has asked as well, and reiterating the point that we've been talking, a lot of people here are sort of interested in renewables and have their own PV, but unless we've actually got in fact a greater mass of consumers, we won't be able to strike a balance, because all the producers will be producing at the same time, because we're in the same area and getting the same sunshine. So unless we do have a sufficient number of pure consumers, this isn't going to work. And so we need to be involving as many consumers as possible.
Yeah.
I just say
sorry.
I was just going to say the one thing I'm taking from the Brixton trial. So although there are only 4 people who signed on to it at the moment, we were really only asking out of 13 people who could say, who had the option to join in. And the people who said yes weren't particularly interested in renewables. They weren't particularly people who were interested in finding the cheapest electricity out there, but they nonetheless said yes and were interested. So I think the one thing that I'm taking from the Brixton trial is that, you will get people, if you engage with them, which Repowering have done really on a very detailed and thorough way, because they know the area and they've really thought about how they're going to engage with the consumers they want to engage with. They have got people to say yes. So I think that's something that the peer-to-peer offer is really unique and does sort of bring some people in, I would say. I don't know, Felix, if you want to agree to that, but that's what I.
I agree. Thanks, Charlotte. Good point.
I mean, certainly people that have been getting involved and looking at the survey, their number one sort of criteria for possibly getting involved. And we've had about getting up closer to 80 people that responded. Say about half of those about 40% of those have their own solar PV. So they've already got vested interest anyway. I just wondered that it's trying to engage with people who don't have anything to do with renewables at this moment in time. One thing that was very heartening in this area of the 80 people that were asked who came back in the survey, probably I think it's, without looking at it now, it's about 80%. Their number one criteria was environmental concerns and reasons. And so, yeah, it's only people, most of the people that responded are either environmentally minded or they've already got PV and they're involved. So it's trying to win over and almost an apathy as well that we might have with people that possibly see what we're trying to do is just selling more PV, and that's not the case. We're trying to get them on board as consumers you know, everyone can benefit. That's one key message we want to take away from today, that everyone in the local community can benefit from this. So yeah, it's going back to
can I ask a quick question I put up there earlier? So obviously there's been various similar projects around the country, and you know, locally there's the Sunshine Tariff that was done as part of WREN's portfolio of projects, and obviously the Cornwall LEM project led by Centrica. It's probably a question to, you know, the core WREN team, or to Philip, as to how this is building on the work done by others, to either sort of get a harmonized structure of these sort of trading platforms that then can dovetail together as everyone comes on board. Yeah. And then the second part of that is what are the geographical limits of this particular trial?
Yeah, can I answer that? So I was involved in the Sunshine Tariff, and I've also then, as a domestic consumer, in the Cornwall LEM. So I was seeing that. I think it's building on the Sunshine Tariff, which sort of looked at how demand could be made to vary with cheaper electricity, and obviously the outcome being a slightly disappointing one, that people can shift their demand for electricity, but not to a great extent. I mean, the maximum seemed to be about 13% shift from, say, evening to daytime. And that sort of, to me, emphasises the importance of either battery storage to shift supply, or having sufficient consumers on to have sufficient demand at the times that we are producing. The Cornwall LEM seemed to be, towards the end, from a domestic point of view, to be sort of focusing on how you could use the storage and the battery spread across a lot of people to provide things like fast frequency response to sort of the network and the grid.
Yeah, grid services.
It was more about those sort of grid services rather than an actual supply of electricity between peers. So it's looking at a sort of a different aspect.
I appreciate that, but you can't really look at one without the other, because if you're looking at unlocking a range of, say, commercial or, you know, medium-sized installations, renewable energy installations, then you're going to have grid capacity issues, and there are going to be barriers, probably capital cost barriers, to deploying your projects. So there's an inertia in the fact that we haven't got the supply and demand trends synchronized, and obviously that's what these projects were meant to do. And obviously there's an incentive for these sort of schemes to be able to match supply and demand, so that we can deploy more renewables onto the grid at hopefully a lower cost. So obviously there's a lot of projects out there doing that and using peer-to-peer trading. It's just obviously how that's feeding into this particular project.
Yes, so we're as part of the feasibility study, we'll be looking at all the other forms of peer-to-peer that are currently under pilot or test in the UK and further afield. We've identified them in Australia, New Zealand, New York, and in Germany as well. So there's lots of people doing it in lots of different ways. At the moment, you know, ideally what we want to be able to produce is a blueprint that will allow other communities and to develop a platform that will allow other communities to join that platform, and it become essentially a larger aggregation than, you know, and potentially in the future then look at things like grid services. But with regards to, yeah, everyone not changing their energy pattern, we're hoping that we've been able to really understand how the energy profile of a local area moves energy around, and where there's dips and troughs and peaks, and how big they are, you know, sort of like the delta T of those, is to then be able to identify, well, what is the benefit of that, and what is the impact, and what value can be driven from that. There's going to be a lot of to-ing and fro-ing with Ofgem, and I'm sure Felix will back me up on that. But it's one of these things where, you know, we will obviously, you know, talk to all of the other projects. We've already been in contact with the LEM to find out where our projects could potentially dovetail and what they mean for each other. But then, you know, we hope to look at something that can be potentially Cornwall wide and then maybe nationwide later on. But we've got to do our first bit, baby steps, first part, and then look at wider impacts and how they might scale up. So Mark Wilshire has also had a couple of questions. So just to answer those, he's asked if public charging points can be connected to the peer-to-peer. Yeah, absolutely. Depending on who owns them and whether or not they are agreeable to sign up, we you know, any consumer can hopefully be able to sign up to the platform as and when it's ready. And again, yeah, local supermarkets. At the moment, as I said, we're kind of focused on domestics and local businesses, but it all depends on the scale. And if, you know, it becomes obvious that we can't achieve the scale that is required to make it a viable platform, then we'll be widening the net. I think a question was asked as well, Mark, about the area that we're covering in this feasibility study. So it is the Wadebridge and Padstow community network area. So it's quite a significant chunk of North Cornwall that we are looking. Essentially anyone with a PL 26, 27 and 28.
Up to 29. I was going to come in on that because, interestingly enough, on the survey, people have, it's been about 20% of people that come back to us have been outside of that area. There's quite a few PL30s that want in on this. So,
oh, that's great.
So it's slightly bigger, but yeah, I don't know if you wanted to answer that. Is that geographical boundary absolute?
It's not absolute. We just had to draw the line somewhere and to make it kind of manageable for our target area. But, you know, essentially it is something that we would love to extend to a much larger proportion of Cornwall, if not all of Cornwall. But there's lots of great other great community energy groups that hopefully, if we can prove that it works, that they would want to do similar things and have the power to make the decisions about how theirs work in their own local communities, but share the same platform, so we don't all have to reinvent the wheel each time.
Okay, there's just a few more have come in, just a few more questions. Okay, just with Frankie, to everyone. I mean, you can ask if you want to unmute, you can ask verbally, but I'll read these ones out. Hi, we have POV in Chapel Amble and want to install more panels, but Western Power says no. How can capacity be increased? Oh, actually, Chris, you're probably best first to answer.
Well, actually, it might be, Mark might want to say something about export limiting devices.
Yeah.
So I think the simple situation here is you have to ask the question, and you have to, if you ask the question of Western Power on a different day, then you'll get a different answer. There's no reason why you can't install more. You need to put a proposal into Western Power and see what options you've got locally. Obviously, from their response, then you can make lots of different investment choices, either to spend some money on grid upgrades, or you can look at a system that is export limited, i.e. will only export to the grid what Western Power will permit you to do so. If you can then use the subsequent generation above that, then it's just as good as doing it without an export limitation. Obviously, people like myself and Tony can provide advice on that when we're looking at projects with you to simulate against your demand.
Yes, we would be interested in that. This is Steve of Steve and Frankie, Chapel Amble. We have asked Western Power, but they have said that we are up to the capacity which their wires will permit. We could probably add another 2 kilowatts, but we'd probably like to put more on. So it would be interesting talking to you about that.
Well, as I say, we can, Tony and I can share our contact details, being fair to Tony as well as my good self, and you can get in touch, and we'll happily provide some advice on that. Yeah, it would be a different conversation with Western Power about an export limitation device, but it's simple.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I've just put my email address in the text there, so you can get a hold of us, and I'm sure Mark will be able to add his as well. And yeah, just Mark's absolutely right. Some of the equipment these days you can use to increase the size of your array without upsetting Western Power export limitation. And yeah, ask the right engineer on the right day to get the right answer, which is the trickiest one of the three.
They came out to have a look, and they said that they seemed to think that was about as much as we could have. This was probably a year ago.
There's a few more questions that have come through. So is the feasibility study going to take into account future domestic energy use profiles with smart white goods, etc.? Not this part of the feasibility study. Unfortunately, we just don't have the funding or the capacity. I mean, we kind of have to keep it quite limited on how we're going to, what we're actually looking at, and try and draw some conclusions from that. But yeah, it would certainly be of interest if we can get some evidence about what impact that will have on people's energy consumption in the future. Then it would be of interest for us to look at it in a future project. We have actually hopefully going to get some extra university student help. We've currently got interviews with internships next week, so we will be getting some fresh new research blood coming in and helping us look at some future questions that we could have a look at. We'd love to be able to get a list of everyone on the LEM project. Unfortunately, it's all down to GDPR and data protection rules. We have spoken to them about it, and they said the best thing that they can do is for us to basically spread the word locally, and they were sure that whoever is involved in the project would make themselves known. So thank you for that suggestion.
Did you just a bit more on that? Was just if did you get any indication from them of kind of what profile of people were getting involved? Because picking up on what Kevin's saying, and I understood that what he was saying about, you need a load of consumers to make sure there's people wanting this stuff all through the day. The people like Kevin and people like me who've already got batteries, small PV arrays, tuning our lives to try and minimize, we're actually really annoying for you, aren't we? Because we're just another person to deal with who's actually contributing very little and taking very little. So don't you want some kind of fairly straightforward kind of punters who don't have PV, who don't have batteries, who just need electricity, and what's the best way of getting those kinds of people involved who aren't necessarily WREN members or?
Absolutely. Well, that's why we've called it the Energy Equality Programme, because we want to basically preach to the not converted. That is our aim. As it is at the moment, we can only connect with those who are within our kind of social media. And Simon, do you want to talk through the efforts that you've done with regards to community engagement?
Yes, I mean, plainly, a month ago, my job role changed drastically because as a community engagement officer, my whole approach was to go out and actually meet people face to face and talk them into it. And actually, that's proven quite difficult when you're stuck at home. Yeah, I mean, yes, that is very much what we want to do, is to really get people on board and actually really nail the idea that this is for everyone, not just for those of us who are lucky enough to have already got solar panels, who were in a position and incentivized anything in the last 10, 15 years to do so. So it really is, it is word of mouth. It's, there is a general feeling, I get just before Corona came into being the most important thing at the moment, rightfully so, people were starting to think about their impact environmentally. So I think there are people wondering how they can help. They might do simple things like recycling, but what's the next step up? What is our legacy going to be when we depart this planet? And it's the next generation. What are we leaving them with? So they can apply pressure. Those of us that are effectively already on board need to keep talking about it, and we need to make it the norm. We need to make people feel that this is a default, a very simple next step in doing something about the climate crisis, or just bettering yourself and moving away from fossil fuels as a power source. But yes, it is word of mouth. It's keep talking, and slowly we'll get there. As someone I think alluded to, Rome wasn't built in a day, but I think this is a time to really push on.
And I think that probably wraps it up with our final message, really, of yeah, please go and tell everyone about it. There's lots of areas of the community that we just don't have the access to, but you guys might have the access to. So please, absolutely talk to your friends, your families. Stay safe, stay healthy. And Simon, you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, just sorry we have gone over by 10 minutes. I do apologise for that, but thank you very much for joining us. We will go back and we have recorded this, and we'll have see if we can get an understanding of what it is people really want to nail down on and know about the project. And it could well be that we'll be doing another one next month where we can refine our message and really get to the crux of other points and issues that we've only touched on briefly today. So thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Watch this space.
Bye all.
Thank you very much. Cheerio.
Bye. Bye.
Bye bye.